Sure. The meeting with the ITC was designed to explore and do a deep dive on the cost elements that are prohibiting or being a major hurdle to the deployment of small cell. And so we looked at several different cost elements, a total of 10 of them, and then discussed them and debated them, and it determined which of the elements would be appropriate for the ITC, Innovation Technology Council, to explore and do a deep dive to see if we couldn't come up with some solutions. So out of those 10 areas, of those 10 cost elements in the equation, we decided to focus on 5. And there's a lot of overlap there, but one of them is an educational issue. So we established a working group called the CIO Economic Development Working Group, and the chair is Chris Fisher. And what that working group is designed to do is to coordinate with the wireless CIO industry, because the CIOs are going to have to contribute to this and understand what a small cell is. It's not a macro cell, and that's basically the problem right now in the metropolitan areas, and with zoning and planning, they all look at this as a macro cell, and it's not, and they overlay the planning and zoning and permitting costs as if it was a macro cell. So education of the CIO community of the metropolitan areas and the state and local people is going to be critical. So we have a group that is going to meet with that CIO association and begin a dialogue there. The second group is called the Pole Attachment and Local Zoning Group, headed up by Jim Lockwood, an outstanding guy. And basically the permitting and zoning is so onerous and costly with regard to schedule and cost. And it's solely because the metropolitan boards are looking at this like a macro cell. It's not a macro cell, and we have to show them and offer model ordinances that will accelerate the zoning and planning processes. The next group is the DAS and small cell definition group. They're going to actually define the equipment and the physical properties of various small cells that are offered in the market. And this will be a fundamental group that will be the results of which will be used by the other groups, like the CIO group, in order to tell the CIOs what is a small cell. Well, here's a small cell. This is what it is. Here are the power requirements. This is the size of X manufacturer, Y manufacturer, Z and here's the roadmap. They're getting smaller and smaller. So as CIO, as you can see, it's no big deal, I mean, physically. The same is true with the zoning and planning boards. So this group is going to define what a small cell is so that it can be used in the other groups. The third working group, or the fourth working group, is let's see, it's a training working group. The training. It's headed up by Professor Rinken Thacker from University of Maryland, and we're looking at the needs for professional people in the future. What curricula will be required? What skill sets will be required for the technicians in the future? Tower climbers are important, but with fiber going to the top of the tower now, it's going to be ultimately important for these guys to increase their skill sets so they can actually work on the optoelectronics at the top of the tower or on top of a building. And so the skill sets are going to be have to be elevated, and so this working group is designed to help develop the curriculum that will train our future workforce. The last working group that was formed is an architectural recommendations for indoor DAS. And that's PCIA already has a working group on that, but that is such a critical item that Tracy Ford is heading it up and is going to be our liaison between the ITC and the PCIA working group. And so we're going to coordinate efforts there so we don't have to duplicate efforts and there won't be any overlap. So those are the 5 working groups that we've established, and we hope to have a readout on the working groups in May of 2016 at the annual conference. So we'll have our first chairman's conference call this week, and so we'll get that kicked off. That's correct. That's the problem. That is a very significant problem in that there's no uniformity to the zoning and planning processes. So you have to understand the local processes. And so we're going to look at that very deeply. And hopefully we can address the issue with some model ordinances that would be applicable to small cell. You know, one of the carriers suggested that small cell should only require an electrical permit, period, full stop. Makes sense. It's no bigger than a signage on the front of Joe's shoe repair shop. And all you need there is an electrical permit. So, but again, the perspective of the local zoning and permitting bodies think this is a cell site, a macro cell, and it's not. So we have to educate them and then offer some model ordinances possibly. I'm not sure what the working group's going to come up with, but I would assume something like that. Well, it's up to the OEMs to make it simple, plug and play. But most of the time it comes out of the box as plug and pray. You hope it works. So if you've got a guy on the top of a tower and he's praying that this thing's going to work, it'd help if he had some additional skill sets with regard to fiber connectivity, with regard to, looking at the output of a test set and understanding what that means and what remediation is required to make it work.